With the news this week that an attorney for the Southern Poverty Law Center, he's a staff attorney, he was arrested for domestic terrorism in Atlanta. Now, it's worth remembering that the SPLC does more than collaborate with rioters. These are Antifa people. They're there. Now, he was released yesterday from prison, but he still has those charges pending on him. They said, SPLC said he was there as an observer to make sure that the police did not use brutal tactics on these protesters. They weren't protesters. This was an organized effort to attack the police. But anyway, the Southern Poverty Law Center, aligned with these Antifa folks, are also in your children's schools. They sponsor a program called Learning for Justice, but it's about anything but justice. It's about the indoctrination of children with their leftist ideology. With a massive endowment and a seemingly limitless budget, they have about $750 million. Just how prevalent are SPLC programs in education? Well, joining me now to discuss this is Meg Kilgannon, Senior Fellow for Education Studies at the Family Research Council. She is also the author of a comprehensive report titled The SPLC's Radical Learning for Justice Program. She is a former member of the Trump Department of Education team. Meg, welcome back to Washington Watch.
Thanks for having me, Tony.
Now, you wrote the book on this. First off, what are the ideologies that the Southern Poverty Law Center, this organization that is aligned with Antifa and rioters, what are they pushing in our schools to our children?
The use of the term radical, I think sometimes we can be desensitized to that word because it's thrown around a lot these days. But in the very truest sense of that definition, the Southern Poverty Law Center is a radical organization that is indoctrinating. It is embedded within school systems. It's embedded in colleges of education. In Boise, Idaho, for example, there's a college there where the teachers are trained how to use the Southern Poverty Law Center's lesson plan tool on their website to create their lesson plans and to use SPLC resources to develop those lesson plans. So everything that the 1619 Project hopes to be for education, the Southern Poverty Law Center is and has been since the early 90s.
So the Southern Poverty Law Center's response to one of their staff attorneys being arrested is they were very aggressive in defending him, saying he was there as an observer to ensure that that the police did not violate the rights of these individuals. Well, we know, according to what the police have said, and of course all this is, I would hope it's all going to come out eventually, this appears to be a internationally planned riot, attack that was orchestrated. I mean, they had equipment, they had shields, they had body armor. So this wasn't like a protest that went bad. So this is a group that there's a lot of strings that we saw linking them to, actually more than strings. We saw them very heavily aligned with Antifa during 2020 and all those riots. What are they doing in elementary schools? I mean, who is opening the door to them to allow this radical leftist organization to be indoctrinating our children?
Well, there's a movement in social studies education, in civics education, for something called action civics. And you need to think about this in terms of your children being trained to be protesters. So these other radicals that were going to this riot with the attorney from the Southern Poverty Law Center, I think we should just note that the Southern Poverty Law Center bailed out their attorney, right? But those rioters are still in jail. So if your student gets talked into doing a protest like this, they should be aware that they're not going to be the ones necessarily bailed out unless they're in a blue state with a Soros prosecutor or Kamala Harris gets wind of things.
But I want to drill down on that a little bit, because that is part of what we've seen happening in education, is facilitating students becoming basically the ground troops for the left.
I think one of the incidents that relate to this that's in the most memory for most people is after the shooting in Parkland, Florida, when the former student went back into his school and killed people there. There was a lot of gun control advocacy following that event. And the next year, there were major protests on the anniversary, which happens to be Valentine's Day, where students were walking out and protesting for gun control in the United States. And this kind of activity is completely in step with what Action Civics programs teach. The idea is to teach you about democracy in action. So you learn about government because you're participating in government. So there's no reason for anybody to learn the three branches of government or how a bill becomes a law or how a Supreme Court justice is confirmed. You just need to go and protest bills that are becoming law and protest Supreme Court justices as they're being confirmed. And that's supposed to teach you about the process.
Yeah, so we're not teaching our kids the ABCs of government. We're teaching them the MOB of government, the mob, how you intimidate and how you riot. Is it safe to say, based upon how the SPLC has gotten into classrooms, that they're buying their way in with the millions of dollars that they're sitting on, a lot of it in offshore accounts, by these financial incentives that they're giving to teachers?
Well, they offer a lot of free information to teachers. They have professional development that's in line with their radical ideology. They have social justice standards that they lobby state legislatures and departments of education to adopt their social justice standards. They've been engaged with Black Lives Matter for many years. There's a professional development lesson on Black Lives Matter that is on the website that dates all the way back to 2016. And the photo for that is a photo that features the symbol for Asante's daughters, which is interesting because that group is started in honor of a woman who is on the FBI most wanted list for shooting a police officer, murdering a police officer in the early 70s. And she's thought to be living in Cuba now. And she's on the FBI terrorist most wanted list. So this is the kind of thing that is, I mean, that's just one example of many kinds of truly radical people and ideologies that are woven through this program that is marketed to elementary school, middle school, and high schoolers.
So how many schools across the nation has the SPLC been able to get their indoctrination into?
I would say that it would surprise me if there was a classroom that hadn't at one point or another been reached by this curricula. I mean, it's been around since 1991. The Teaching Tolerance used to publish as a magazine. Now everything's been rebranded Learning for Justice. But this kind of material they've been working their way into the system over many decades. And that kind of long-standing effort tends to bear fruit.
Have they become more radical or overt in their radicalism?
Yes, they don't hide their revolutionary language anymore. There's no they make no bones about the fact that they are educating for social change. They want to have radical groups and radical ideas mainstreamed, and the idea that America is bad and that America must fundamentally change before justice can be achieved, ignoring all of the progress that we've made over the years and how we have been working toward a more perfect union as the stated goal from the very beginning, right?
Are they assisted by, like, in the Biden administration, the Department of Education? I mean, do they have allies at the federal level that's helping them get this indoctrination, this material into the classrooms?
I think that they are such a darling of the left that they are called on often to be experts. I mean, when I was working at the Department of Education, it was in the summer of George Floyd, and there were all kinds of things happening there with regard to that situation. And SPLC people, speakers were featured at different professional conversations around race that were happening at that time. So yes, they're a very accepted group in on the left, and I think that a lot of people are blind to their very radical and frankly Marxist and communist roots.
Well, I mean, the lawless. I mean, if they are aligned with Antifa, this attack in Atlanta on a law enforcement training site that is under construction, this is lawlessness, and they're facilitating that, and they're very open, very brazen about that. So how can parents, educators know if this, especially parents, how can they know if this has made it in its way into their child's classroom?
Well, you should check. Most of the state standards for social studies education are available on the website of your state education department. And you should look through those standards and make sure that they are not relying on resources. There are no footnotes mentioning teaching tolerance or learning for justice. There are a number of other groups, 1619 Project, there are a number of other groups that have radical ideas about race and trying to foment division over the issue of race. So it's not just the Southern Poverty Law Center, but they are the group that has been working at this the longest, that has the biggest footprint in this area.
What's so offensive about the Southern Poverty Law Center is that there have been examples like in Minnesota where parents have organized to counter their indoctrination, and then they pull out this hate group label and slap it on to these parents. So they're playing as if they're the referee and arbiter of who can have a debate and who is an anti-government organization, and that's exactly what they're engaged in. So
No,
again,
100%.
Before we run out of time, give the name of the report that you've been able that you have published and where folks can get a copy of it.
It's at frc.org, and it's the Southern Poverty Law Center, SPLC's Radical Learning for Justice program.
All right, it's a multi-page, footnoted, extensively researched document. You can find it there at frc.org or go to tonyperkins.com and follow the links over. Meg, this is serious stuff because this is shaping the minds of children. You know, we talk a lot about when a worldview is shaped between 13 months and 13 years. They're going right after them in those elementary years when that worldview is being shaped.
They are, and it is really important to understand how infused this is into the mindsets and into the education pedagogy that goes on at your university's teacher education program. So if you're looking to find the roots of this, you need to look on in a lot of different places.
Yeah. All right, Meg Kilgannon, always great to talk with you. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Tony.